We continue the Gemara today on Daf Ches Samud Beis towards the bottom of the Yamud where it says V'Rabbanon. The first word on the line is Tzara. So this is now going to explain the two opinions that we had here. From where do we learn out the halacha that when the Yevama is an erva, it's asa to be meyavmer. There's no mitzvah of yibum. So one opinion was from the brayso that was brought earlier on Daf Gimel Amud Beis. You learn it out from Gzeira Shava, Aleha, Aleha. Then the Gemara brought here a second opinion. So the Gemara is going to refer to that as the Rabbanon. Then the Gemara brought a second opinion here, which is Rabbi, that says, you learn it out from this that it says, L'kacha v'yivma. That comes, the extra hey of those two words come to tell you that dafka this woman, but not the tzara of a woman which is an erva. So we have two different limudim here. So the continuation of the Gemara will now explain what do each one of these Tanoim do with the other drasha of the other Tana, which is an extra word. Sagt the Gemara, V'Rabbanon. So now according to the Rabbanon, the first brayse, Hayu l'kacha, this extra word, or at least the extra hey of l'kacha, my of delay, what do they learn from this? Answers the Gemara, Mi bayalu l'ked Rav Yosi b'Chanina. They need this to dash what Rav Yosi b'Chanina said. Oh, Rav Yosi b'Chanina, ulakacha, what I learned from this pasuk ulakacha is as follows. Melamid, this teaches me that shemigarsha beget to machzira, that once a person was miyavim his yivama, she becomes now a regular wife to him, and so much so that he can divorce her with a regular get, and even more than that, and that's the main thing that we learn out from the pasuk umachzira, he could actually remarry her. Don't forget that this woman originally was Eishes Achiv, which is the erva of Achiv Kares. Only because it was his Yevama, that erva of Chiyav Kares was removed. But the Chiddush here is, once he marries her as a Yevama, and even after he divorces her, that original Chiyav Kares never comes back of Eishes Achiv. He can then remarry her if he wants, and that's what the pasuk here says, Ulakacha, he could remarry her regularly as a wife. And then, what do we learn out from the extra word V'yivma, or at least the extra hey of V'yivma? That al-Khalcha. This is coming to teach me that a person can marry his Yevama even against her will. Unlike regular Kiddushin, where you only marry a woman midaita, only with her consent. This is how Rabbana, that is, use these two words of L'kacha and V'yivma. The Rebbe, not according to Rebbe, from where does he know these two halachas that Rabbana learn from here? The Rav Yosi b'Chanina, the halacha of Rav Yosi b'Chanina, mila isha nafka. He learns it out from this that it uses the term in the pasuk that Yevama Yave Alecha v'Lekacha Leili Isha. So Leisha means that she becomes like a regular wife, and he could remarry her again as a regular wife. That's from where he learns it out. Al Karcha, from where does he learn out that he can marry her even against her will? Because the pasuk says Mi Yevama Yave Alecha. The term Yevama Yave Alecha means that he comes, he marries her, even against Nafka. That's where he learns it out, that even against her will. Now the Gemara goes back to the drasha that we had in there, first brayse, right? The Rabbana learned it out from Aleha, a Gzeira Shava, to teach me that even that when there is a Issa Erva of Kares, there's no mitzvah of Yibum. So now the Rebbe, according to Rebbe, Hi Aleha Mayavidle. So that Aleha that it says here, when you get to the Chiyav Kares, so all the Arayas that are Chiyav Kares, so what does he do with this extra word Aleha? So now the Gemara is going to bring a few Mishnahs here and a whole lengthy discussion. Just before we learn the whole thing, the point of what the Gemara is going to say is that this Aleh, according to Rebbe, is also used for a Gzeira Shava. And the point that this Gzeira Shava, according to Rebbe, it's going to come to teach me is B'negeh ta Karban Chatos. Karban Chatos is brought for an Aveda B'Shegig. But the question is for which Aveda B'Shegig? So the Gemara here will bring, it's only for an Aveda B'Shegig that if you would do that Aveda B'Mezid, you would be Chayiv Kares for it. Then if you do it b'shegig, you bring a karban chatos. From where do we know this? So we're going to learn it out from the aleha that it says here by the arayis that are chiyav kares, and we're going to compare it to the aleha that it says by the karban chatos, Gzeira Shava, to teach me that yechayev only if it's a chiyav kares, if it would have been b'mezid. Okay, but now the Gemara will bring over here two mishnahs. There are a lot of different kinds of karban chatos. There isn't only one type of karban chatos. For a yochid, there's many different kinds of karban chatos, as we'll see here. And this drasha of aleh will help us bring us a source for all the different types of karban chatos, that they all have the same rule. That you only bring a karban chatos if it's for an aveda that would have been b'mezid kares. Let's see. Zak the Gemara, Likiditanya, or the Girsa, another Girsa here is Likiditnan. We learned in the Mishnah. So it starts off with a karban chatos that a bezin has to bring. Ein chayavim bezdin el al davish is doine kares v'shegigase chatos. A bezdin only brings a carbon chatos if it's something that b'mezid it was kares, then b'shegig it's a chatos. When does a bezdin bring a carbon? That's if a bezdin paskin the halacha and all the Klal Yisrael went and did according to their psak, and it ended up being an aveda. So it has to be an aveda of kares. Then the bezdin is the one that brings a carbon chatos. Similar, v'chein a Mashiach. There's a carbon, a specific kind of carbon for a kohen Mashiach, which is specifically a kohen that was anointed with a special oil. So he also brings a unique carbon chatas, different than the carbon of a regular individual when he does an aveda b'shegig. Another kind of carbon chatas, v'loi ba'avedas kechavim, regarding a person that served aveda zara b'shegig. So he also only brings a carbon chatas. Ella al dava shechayavim al zdaynei kares v'shegigase chatas. It has to be such a kind of avodah zarah that b'mezid would have been kares. So Rashi points out over here there are different kinds of ways a person would serve avodah zarah. So if a person just takes a avodah zarah, hugs it or kisses it, that's not something you'd be chayav kares for. But the Rashi says zivuach, kitur, nisuch, shtachva, shechting a carbon or other things like that. Those are things that b'mezid you'd be chayav kares for, and then b'shegig there's a chatas. Now the Gemara brings another Mishnah here, where it lists other kinds of chatois, and again, the same rule that it has to be an aveda that b'mezid there would be kares. Tanan Nami, it says there another Mishnah, this is all Mishnayis and Hoiriyis, that call mitzvah shebetayre, any isser of the Teire, shechayav and alzadayne, kares v'shegigasi chatos, if b'mezid it would be kares, so then b'shegig there's chatos. So here, the Braisa spells out more of the details regarding the differences between one carbon and another. So Yachid, an individual brings a carbon chatas. What does his carbon chatas consist of? Maybe kizbay seira. He brings a lamb or a goat, but it's all females. Nasi, if it's a nasi that did an aveda b'shegig and he has to bring a carbon chatas, so it says in the pasuk there, asher nasi yachta, it's a separate carbon. So he maybe soir. He brings a goat, a male goat. Moshiach, the kohen Mashiach that did an aveda b'shegig, Bezdin, or the Bezdin, the paskin for everyone, and everyone did an aveda b'shegig, meviim par, they bring a much bigger carbon, a bull. U'ba'avedes kechavim, when it comes to aveda zareh, if someone served aveda zareh b'shegig, yachid, nasi, u'mashiach, any of these individuals, whether it's a plain individual or a nasi or a mashiach, meviim seira, they all bring a female goat. Tzibur, if it's the tzibur, or really means the bezdin, that the whole tzibur did the aveda zareh b'shegig because of the bezdin. So then over here they actually bring two karbanis, miviim par v'soir. Par lo'ila, a bull will be for the oila, and a soir and a goat l'chatos. They bring this for a chatos. Okay, so we have a bunch of different kinds of karbanis chatos, and it's different kinds of animals that are brought, everybody according to their level. So now the question is, mina hani mili. From where do I know the point, which is the common denominator of all of them, that you chayav a carbon chatos only if it's an aveda that b'mezid you'd be chayav kares for this. So the Gemara brings now, it's all based on this aleha. The Tan Rabbanan, so we learned in a Braisa that explains this. So regarding the carbon chatos, it says, v'noida chatos ashachatu aleha, that they found out the carbon chatos, the aveda that they did, the aleha on this. So what do I learn out from here? So Rabbi says, Nemar kan aleh. It says in this pasuk aleha. This pasuk of V'noida Chatos talks about a case where the whole tzibur did an aveda b'shegig because of the bezdin. And V'nemar lahalon aleha. And it says regarding the arayis, the pasuk that we were learning about a whole time before, the Isha lachaisa, the erva of Eishes Achais Ishtay, that is. So over there it also says aleha. So mala alam davish chayavim al zedaynei kares val shegigase chatos. Just like b'negeya to the erva, when it says the word aleha, it's talking about something which is kares, and then you're going to be chayiv on the shegig chatos as well. Afkan davish chayavim al zedaynei kares val shegigase chatos. This gzeira shava teaches me that over here as well, you only chayiv a chatos if it's something which is kares, where b'mezid it would have been kares. Some of the Rishonim take out these words over here, when it says the first time at least, because this is the source of where we're learning it out from. We don't yet know this. It can't tell you that by the erva of Eishes or Achais Ishta you'd be chayiv b'shegig chatas, because this is the very source here. Point is, we're learning out this Gzeira Shava, Allah to tell me, just like Allah by Achais Ishta is kares, so too the Allah here regarding the carbon chatas is only for an aveda that b'mezid it would be kares. Okay, so again, afkan davish chayav mazleine kares v'shegigase chatas. This is the first limud. Now we're going to have to try to bring the same rule and show how do I know that this applies to all the other kinds of carbon chatos that we mentioned before. So the Gemara, Ashkechan Sibur. So we have this Gzeir Shava regarding the carbon Sibur. Mashiach Minolan. How do we know that the same applies to the carbon chatos that the Kayim Mashiach brings? So the answer is the Chsiv Mashiach. By the Kayim Mashiach, the language the pasuk uses is La Ashmas Ha'am. That his Aveda is an Aveda of the nation. So what does this mean? Hare Mashiach Kitzibur. The pasuk is telling you La Ashmas Ha'am, that compare his Asham, his Aveda, and his carbon chatos to the carbon chatos that the people, that the tzibur would bring. So just like the tzibur, we just had the limit of aleh, that it's only for something which b'mezid is kares, so too regarding the Kayim Mashiach. Okay, the Gemara moves on. Yachid v'nasi, the two individuals, whether it's a yachid that does a carbon, that does an aveda b'shegig, or a nasi that does an aveda b'shegig, how do I know that they also bring a carbon chatos only for an aveda which is b'mezid kares? Asya mitzvahs mitzvahs. It says by the yachid that does an aveda b'shegig, the term mitzvahs. It says v'ashe. It says by the yachid. It says v'im nefesh achas techta, b'saisa ma'achas mitzvahs Hashem. So that's by the yachid, and it also says by the nasi. Asher nasi yachtav achas mikol mitzvahs Hashem, and it also says b'nigeya to the whole tzibur that does an aveda b'shegig. It also uses the term that hakahal v'asu achas mikol mitzvahs. So by all three of them, it uses the term mitzvahs or mitzvahs. So therefore I compare them and I say, just like we already learned out regarding the carbon chatos of the tzibur, that has to be for an aveda that's b'mezid kares, so too regarding the mitzvahs or the mitzvahs, that it says by the yachid and the nasi, that it's also only for the same kind of aveda. Weiter, the next carbon chatos that we mentioned before, v'loi ba'avodas kechavim, same regarding the carbon chatos b'shegig for avodas zara, el al davar shechayav mos dainik kares val shekigase chatos. So how do I know this? So the Gemara divides this. When it comes to doing the aveda b'shegig of avodas zara, there is when the tzibur served avodas zara b'shegig, and there is when an individual serves avodas zara b'shegig. If you look in Parsha Shlach, which is the parsha where the parsha of the Avodah Zarah is written. So over there, the beginning of the parsha talks about a tzibur that does Avodah Zarah b'shegig, and then afterwards it says the parsha regarding an individual that serves Avodah Zarah b'shegig. So the Gemara says that again, tzibur b'avodas kechavim, when it comes to a tzibur that served Avodah Zarah, so how do I know that they only bring for an Avodah Zarah, which b'mezid there would be kares yalef me'enei me'enei. You learn out the Gzeir Shava, the word me'enei that it says over here by the Avodah Zarah. It says in the pasuk over here me'enei. It says v'hoya im me'enei ha'eda nesas gaga, and it also says b'nigeh to b'chlal, any carbon tzibur that the carbon chatos that the tzibur has to bring. Over there it also uses the term v'nelam davar me'enei akol. So I compare the carbon chatos by every aveda b'shegig to the carbon chatas by avodah zara b'shegig, that it's only for something which it would be b'mezid kares. That's regarding the avodah zara of the tzibur. Yachid, Nasi, Umashiach, any of these individuals, whether a regular individual or a Nasi or the Kayim Mashiach, if they served avodah zara b'shegig, how do I know that it's only for an avodah zara which b'mezid would be kares? The answer is because, like I said, in the second half over there in that parsha, in Parsha Shalach, it says afterwards the halacha regarding an individual that serves avodah zara. So what's the term the pasuk uses? Meve'im nefesh achas. It says in the pasuk, and if one individual serves avodah zara. So what it says ve'im with a vav, and therefore what do I say? Echad yachid. This refers both to when it says nefesh. Nefesh means one person. It means a yachid, ve'echad nasi, ve'echad mashiach. These are all one individual, one nefesh, ve'mashma. It's included in the word nefesh. And what does it say in the pasuk? It says it with a vav, ve'im. So therefore I say as follows, Maisif al inyan rishin. The vav of ve'im means that what it says here regarding the individual is adding, and it's similar to what it said before. What did it say before? Before it was speaking about the halacha of avodah zara regarding the tzibur. So v'yilmay tachtain mina elya. I learn out the later parsha when it says v'im nefesh achas from what it said earlier before, from the elyin. What it said earlier, just like we already learned out before regarding the avodah zara of the tzibur. I learned out with the Gzeir Shava me'enei that you only bring a chatos for an aveda that's b'mezid kares. The v'im says I apply the same thing to any individual that serves avodah zara, that it's only on an aveda that b'mezid is kares. So this is all the limud according to Rebbe. This is the conclusion. This explains us what Rebbe learned out from that extra word aleha. He doesn't learn it for what the Rabbanan learned it, to teach me b'negei to the halacha of Yevamos, but he learns it over here b'negei to this halacha of Karban Chatas, that this rule, that there's only a Chatas for Shegig if it's an Aveda, which is b'mezid Kares. And the Gemara showed that applies to all different kinds of Chatais. Now, according to the Rabbanan, that this Aleha is not extra for this Gzeir Shaveh, so Hai Svarim Minaluhu. From where do they know this halacha? This that b'negei to every Karban Chatas. Answers the Gemara, Nafkaluhu, the Rabbanan learned this out, from what Rabbi Yeshua taught his son. What did he teach his son? It says in the Pasuk, Torah Achas, this is actually in the Pasuk, in Parashas Shalach, by the Parasha of Avodah Zarah, in the second half of the Parasha of Avodah Zarah, where it talks about a Yachid that serves Avodah Zarah. So he has to bring a Karban Chatas if it was b'Sheigig. So over there the Pasuk says, Torah Achas Yeh Lechem La'oiseh B'Shgaga. V'hanefesh ashetase b'yad rama, and then the pasuk continues immediately and says that if this individual went and served Avodah Zarah b'yad rama, which means that he served Avodah Zarah b'mezid, the pasuk there continues and says, what's the halacha of someone that serves Avodah Zarah b'mezid? That he's chayiv kares. The pasuk there says that v'nichrisa nefesh, he's chayiv kares. So what do I learn out from this? I see over here that regarding Avodah Zarah, we're speaking specifically about what kind of Avodah Zarah, and Avodah Zarah which you would be chayav kares for this. And the Torah uses the term Torah Achas. Torah Achas tells me that this applies not only to Avodah Zarah, but this is the same Torah, the same halacha b'negei to any Karban Chatas that's being brought for an Avodah b'Sheigig. That's what the Gemara says now. So Huksha Kol HaTorah Kula. By using this term of Torah Achas, it tells me that I compare to any Avodah, any Kol HaTorah Kula, any Avodah b'Sheigig la'Avodas Kechavim, to what it says over here in this parasha of Avodah Zarah regarding an individual that serves Avodah Zarah. Ma avodas kechavim, just like it says here regarding Avodah Zarah, davar shechayavim al zadaynei kares. We're speaking about Avodah Zarah, which b'mezid would be kares for this, as the pasuk says right here, kares. V'al shegigase chatos, so then for the sheigig there'll be chatos. Av kol davar, so too any other aveda that's b'sheigig shechayavim al zadaynei kares. So only if it's an aveda that b'mezid you'd be chayav kares, and then v'al shegigase chatos. For that, for the sheigig yichayev a chatos. So that's the limud according to the Rabbanan. But the Gemara says we're not yet done according to the Rabbanan, because Ashkechan, Yachid, V'nasi, U'Mashiach. We only learn from here b'nigeya to an individual that does Avodah Zarah b'Sheigig, or an individual that does any Avodah b'Sheigig, because we're learning it out from the second half of the Parasha of Avodah Zarah, where it's talking about V'han Nefesh. It's talking about only an individual that served Avodah Zarah, which is any individual, whether a Yachid, whether a Nasi, or whether a Kayim Mashiach. And that's Bein B'Avodas Kechavim, or Bein B'Shar Mitzvahs. And we learned it out because it says Torah Achas, both regarding Avodah Zarah and regarding any other Avodah. But the question still is, Tzibur B'Avodas Kechavim Minayin. How do I know that the same applies regarding a Tzibur, regarding Avodah Zarah, that over there as well, it's only the only Chayav Achatas if it's for an Avodah, or if it's an Avodah Zarah, which B'Mezid you'd be Chayav Kares for this. Amakros, over here the answer is similar to what we said before, that the two halves of the parsha by Avodah Zarah are connected to one another. Why? Because it says V'im Nefesh. In the second half, it says it with a Vav. And therefore, according to the Rabbanan, I could learn the parsha before from the parsha later, because there's a Vav connecting them. And now the Gemara says V'yilmad El Yain Mitachtain. I learned out the parsha earlier, the parsha before, which speaks about the tzibur serving Avodah Zarah, from the parsha after, where it speaks about the yachid serving Avodah Zarah. Just like in the parsha where it speaks about the yachid, we learned out that it says there specifically kares, and it says Torah Achas, that you only chayiv if it's an Avodah Mezid kares. So too the Vav tells me that it's connected to the parsha before, where it speaks about the tzibur, that it's only if it's b'mezid kares. Now the Gemara continues, the last step for this whole limud here, according to the Rabbanon. Now, Elot, Tzibur, Bishar, Mitzvahs, Minalan. How do I know regarding the Tzibur, which is through a Bezdin, that all the Tzibur did an Aveda B'Sheigig? How do I know that they don't bring a Karban Chatos unless it's an Aveda which is B'Mezid Kares? So here the Gemara brings the same limud that we had before, according to Rebbe, Yalef, Me'ene, Me'ene. The Tzibur of Avodah Zarah and the tzibur for any aveda b'sheigig, those two are learned out from this gzeira shaveh me'ene, that it says by the tzibur b'sheigig, by any carbon, any aveda, and it says me'ene b'aveda zara, so we compare them to each other. So that's the conclusion of the limud according to the Rabbanan, how I know that all karbanis chatas are brought only for an aveda, which would be b'mezid karas. Now the Rebbe, Gemara comes back and asks, so hi Torah achas my avedle. This term that it says there in the parsha of Avodah Zarah, the Torah writes Torah achas yelchem. It's an extra pasuk. What does it mean to say when it says Torah achas? Rebbe learned out from there that we compare to all the karbanis chatos that has to be like the Avodah Zarah, which is only b'mezid karas. But according to the Rabbanan, what do you learn from it? According to Rebbe, that is, what do you learn from this? My avedle. He learns from here in the halacha of Avodah Zarah for the following halacha that it said in a brayse. What does the brayse say? Because we find the Torah makes a big distinction regarding an individual that serves Avodah Zarah and many that serve Avodah Zarah. What does many serve Avodah Zarah over here mean? This is talking about the whole city that served Avodah Zarah. A city that served Avodah Zarah is called an Ir Hanidachas. So what's the difference? Yechidim b'skila, that is. An individual that serves Avodah Zarah, and he got the warning for this with Eidim, so his einish is skila. So lefichach, that's a very severe death, kind of a death. Mimaynan palat, his money gets saved. We don't take away the money from him. Merubim, but if it's many, again, referring to a whole city that served Avodah Zarah, b'sayif. So then the people of the city, their einish of misa is by a sword. And lefichach, and because of this, that's a lighter punishment. Mimaynan avad, their entire money is destroyed as well. You have to gather all the money in the middle of the city, and it has to all be burnt. So we see that regarding the difference between an individual or a full city that served Avodah Zarah, when it comes to b'mezid, there's a difference in their punishment. So Yachayil, I would think, nachlaik b'karbanei sayin, that's similar when it comes to b'shegig. If it's an individual or a whole city that served Avodah Zarah, I should also make a distinction regarding the carbon that they bring b'shegig. Talmud Loimar, that's what the pasuk here says, Torah achas yelchem. That there's one Torah, meaning that any person that serves Avodah Zarah, he always brings the same carbon chatos. The only time that an entire tzibur brings a different carbon chatos is going back to what we had in the beginning of the Amud regarding a whole entire tzibur. If it's not just one city, but a whole shevet, or maybe the whole Klal Yisrael served Avodah Zarah because of a bezdin that paskened wrong, and they served Avodah Zarah. But if it's just one city is still considered to be like individuals, and it's the same carbon chatos that they bring like a yachid. That's what the pasuk Torah achas yelchem is teaching me. Ask of Rav Chilkiah Magronya. So Rav Chilkiah Magronya asks on this reasoning over here. Now the basis of what the Gemara is going to say over here is, the way the Gemara understands this is that we try to say that there's a difference in the carbon chatos for the Yechidim and the carbon chatos of an entire city that served Avodah Zarah. We want to have a unique, different, special carbon chatos for them. Just like we see by Irani Dachas, B'mezid, that there's a unique punishment for them that you don't find in any other place in Torah. That say that they are killed, and say that all of their money in the city is gathered and burnt. So the Gemara is saying there would have been a svara to say that there's a unique carbon chatas that's brought only for them. And the basis of the Gemara here is going to be that the svara was that this is such a unique carbon that we don't find any other carbon by any aveda b'shegig otherwise in the Torah. So it has to be a unique carbon for them. That was the Havamina. But the Gemara here will point out what's a unique carbon that's only for them. There are so many different kinds of karbanis chatas that we already listed before, that how can we find something that's unique that's not already used by any other Aveda? So the Gemara, so what are you telling me now? Time the cause of Rachmaneh, Torah achas yelchem. The only reason why I know that the Irani Dachas, if it was b'shegig, so they bring the same carbon that you already find in other places, or like you find by Avodah Zarah, is because it says Torah achas, that it has to be the same. If not, what will you say? Hava mineh, I would think to say, nechlak, that they are totally different. Just like b'mezid, their punishment is totally different than anything else we ever know. So too over here, you would think that their carbon chatas b'shegig is totally different. So the Gemara asks, how? How could they be totally different from anything else we know? My laisu, what should they bring? Laisu pa, should we say that they should be different, that they're going to bring a bull for a carbon chatas? That's not something that we don't find anywhere else. Tzibur b'shar mitzvahs hu demaisa. When a tzibur did an aveda b'shegig by any other aveda, that's what they bring. They bring a par. Kizba, let this Irani Dachas bring a Kizba, a female lamb, Yachid b'shar mitzvah sudamaisa. That's what every Yachid by any Aveda brings this. Soyer, to bring a goat, Nasi b'shar mitzvah sudamaisa. That's what a Nasi brings by any other Aveda. Maybe we should say they should bring two korbanos, parla oila v'sar lachatas. They should bring a bull for an oila and a sar for a chatas. That's also not unique. Tzibur b'avedas kechavim hu demaisa. That's what a tzibur brings if the whole tzibur served the Avodah Zarah with a bezdin that made a mistake and allowed them to do this. So what is there unique that we would have thought that they have to bring different than anything else? The elamai. So we come back to Avodah Zarah itself. What does a person, an individual that serves Avodah Zarah, what kind of a carbon chatas that he brings? So ve'elamai si'ira, they'll bring a female goat, yachid nami haina karbani. That's exactly the carbon that a yachid brings when he serves Avodah Zarah. So there, again, the point is, there's nothing unique for this city of the Irani Dachas that serves Avodah Zarah that I could say that they bring this carbon chatas that's different than anything else. So the Gemara says, still, it's tirich. I still need a special pasuk to say that we don't make them different, because there is still an option to make them different than everyone else. So I would maybe say, Hayol v'tzibur b'hayra. Since when you have a tzibur that did any aveda b'hayra with the instruction of a bezdin by mistake, that they did b'shoigig any aveda. So what's the halacha there? Maisu par la'oila v'sar lachatos. They bring a par for an oila and a sar for a chatos. So inonami, maybe I would say over here, when you have a full city which is similar to a tzibur, they also have to bring these two karbanis, but it should be done in a unique way. It has to be different and unique. Maybe what they should do is they should bring it in the reverse, meaning they're going to bring a par for a chatos and a soir for an oila. Instead of bringing the par la'oila and the soir lachatos, they'll bring this unique carbon, but in the reverse. Maybe that's what I would have thought to show that this Irani Dachas is unique. So one answer. Another answer, the Gemara says, inami, or maybe what I would have thought is as follows. Tzarich, that they have to bring a unique carbon, different than anybody else, but there is no unique carbon to give them. Every type of carbon is already brought in all kinds of circumstances. And they ain't like takana. And therefore, because there is no unique carbon that they could bring, so they have no takana. Meaning they have no way of atonement. That gufa would be the point. A whole city that served Avodah Zarah b'shoigig, they have to bring such a unique carbon that we can't even find it for them. And therefore they won't have any kapara. Kamash Malan, that's what the Torah says, Torah achas, meaning that there's the same carbon chatas that a city, a Irani Dachas brings, like an individual that served Avodah Zarah, it's all the same. Okay, this is the conclusion of the sugya that speaks about a carbon chatas. That every carbon chatas has to be for an Aveda which is b'mezit karas. Now the Gemara comes back to Masechta Yevamos to discuss the first Mishnah. Amalei Levi le so Levi says to Rebbe as follows. My irye the Tani Tezvav. Why does the Mishnah only count these 15 different scenarios of arayis or of isurim that the mitzvah of Yibum does not apply? Listni Tezayin. Why does the Mishnah say 16? So there is another one. There's another case of an erve that the Mishnah could say that the brother can't be miyabim. So the Gemara now will talk about this. What exactly is the 16th? Amalei. So Rebbe said back to Levi, he answered him very sharply. Kimedumali, it seems to me, that Levi does not have a brain in his skull. Why not? My daitech. What was your opinion when you were asking this question that you should count the 16th? Imoy. You were speaking about a mother. Imoy anusas aviv. It's a mother which was an anusa of the father. Right, so what happened over here is, if it's an anusa of the father, here's the halacha. If this is your father's wife, even if it's not your mother, but it's your father's second wife, so then a son is not allowed to marry a father's wife after he divorces her or after he passes away. But if it's a mother, it's imoy, which is anusas aviv, meaning that it's not your father's wife, but it's only a woman that your father had a relation with against her will. That's why she's called anusas aviv. So that's a case where the son is allowed to marry her after the father passes away, or not after the father divorces her, but after the father, the son is allowed to marry her. Huh? No, right? It's anusas aviv. Okay, anusas aviv, which is the anusas aviv. It's going to be the first brother that married her. It was not his mother, but the second brother, though, it is his mother. Right? They share the same father, but they don't share the same mother. Okay, so this is going to be imay anusas aviv. So this is another case where you could have a 16th example that there's an erva, that this is the anusa of your father, and therefore you're not allowed to have any relation with her. Again, anusas aviv, the first brother, was allowed to marry her, that is. Anusas aviv, the first brother, was allowed to marry her, but for the second brother, that's his mother, and therefore there's no mitzvah of yibum. Why doesn't the Mishnah mention this as a 16th case? So the Gemara, anusas aviv, if it's talking about a case of anusas aviv, that's not going to work. Because plukte de Rabbi Yehuda v'Rabbanan. This case of anusas aviv is dependent on machlokes of Rabbi Yehuda and the Rabbanan. We had, this was mentioned before in the Gemara, regarding a case of anusas aviv, is a person allowed to marry the anusa of his father? Rabbi Yehuda says, you're not. The Rabbanan say, you are. So according to Rabbi Yehuda that says you are, so then this case is a possible scenario that the Mishnah should mention. The first brother married Anusas Aviv, and that woman, which was Anusas Aviv, is not his mother, but it is his brother's mother. Okay, these are brothers that they share the same father. They don't share the same mother. So this woman is Anusas Aviv, and he's allowed to marry her. But his brother is not allowed to marry because it's his mother. So why does the Mishnah not mention such a case if this woman is now a Yevamos that the brother can't be miyavim her? So the Gemara here is saying that this is a machlokes. It's a machlokes between Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbanan if you're allowed to marry an anusa of your father. And the Mishnah is not mentioning any case of arayis which depends on a machlokes. It only mentions things that everybody agrees to. That's why this case is not mentioned. That's what Rebbe explained to Levi. Okay, so now the Gemara is going to ask on this. Is this really a true fact that our Mishnah only mentions cases that are not dependent on any machlokes? V'loi, no case that there's a machlokes about is mentioned in our Mishnah. V'harei, there's a Mishnah later, and this is actually in the next Perek, Isser Mitzvah. This woman that has to be a Yevamos, she's an Isser Mitzvah. What does an Isser Mitzvah mean? She's only a Erva Midrabanan. This is what's usually known as Shniyas La'arayis, which is only a Isser of Erva Midrabanan. It's a Mitzvah Midrabanan that you shouldn't marry her. That's one example. Or another example, Isser Kedusha. An Isser, which is an Erva where there is no Chiyuv Kares for this. An Erva where there's only a Isser Lav. What's an example of an Erva which is only a Isser Lav? So Rashi says a Mamzeres, or a Nesina. These are women where there's only an Isalav. So what's the halacha regarding this case? Are you allowed to do Yibum for this or not? So the Mishnah in the second Perek over there says that in such a case, so you could only do Chalitze, but not Yibum. You can't do Yibum because there is Issa Midrabanan, or there's a Isalav here. But you can't leave it go altogether because there's no Issa Kodesh. Only if in the case where there's Issa Kodesh is there no concept of Yibum altogether. So you have to do at least Chalitze. That's the Mishnah that it says in the second Perek. Now the Gemara says, the pligi Rabbi Akiva v'Rabbanan. This is a machlokes between Rabbi Akiva and the Rabbanan. Not everybody agrees to this. Why not? So Rashi over here brings, Rabbi Akiva's opinion is that even an erva, which is only a Isalav, is going to be strong enough. A Isalav is the same strong as a Chiyuv Kares. Just like a Chiyuv Kares, you're not allowed to marry at all, and there's no chiyuv of yibum, there's no mitzvah of yibum altogether. It's the same by a chiyuv lav. Rabbi Akiva's opinion is that if you marry a woman that is a chiyuv lav, the child would be a mamzer, just like if you marry a woman that's a chiyuv kares. So he says it's the same thing, lav and kares. So according to Rabbi Akiva, that Mishnah that it says in the second Perek is not true. Rabbi Akiva says a woman that the erva is a lav, so there's no chalitza, there's no yibum, there's nothing, just like kares. So we see Vikatani, and it says that case, even though it's a machlokes between Rabbi Akiva and the Rabbanan. So how could you tell me that the Tana does not mention something that's not a machlokes? So the Gemara answers, Bipirkin ka'amrinan. When Rabbi was saying that the Tana doesn't mention something that's a machlokes, he was speaking about in the first Perek, and that's a Mishnah in the second Perek. Fragt the Gemara, but you have right over here in the first Perek, in the next Mishnah, what does it say? Later in the second Mishnah, it brings that Beis Shammai actually argues on the whole halacha that we learned in the first Perek. Beis Shammai says it's only the erva herself that you can't do a yibum for. But the tzara of the erva, the secondary wife of the erva, that you could do yibum for. And Beis Hillel says no, that it's aser, that not only the erva herself, but also the tzara as well. So we see that our Mishnah is bringing something which is a machlokes between Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel. So the Gemara answers, no, this is not considered to be a regular machlokes, because Beis Shammai, b'makim Beis Hillel, ain't a Mishnah. When you have Beis Shammai that argues with Beis Hillel, so Beis Shammai is considered to be like his words are not counted at all, because the rule always is that we paskin like Beis Hillel. Fragt the Gemara, but there is still a case mentioned in the Mishnah which is a machlokes, and that is v'harei eishis achiv shalei haya by lamai. So this is one of the cases mentioned in the Mishnah that we learn out from the pasuk where it says ki yeshvu achim yachdav, that only if the brothers were living together and then one of them passed away without children, do you have to be miyavim, the brother's wife. But if when one brother was alive, the other brother wasn't born yet. He was born only after the brother passed away. So that's called Eishis Achiv Shlehaya Bailama. You were not alive when your brother was married to her. So and then the Mishnah said there's no mitzvah of Yibum. The plea, get Rab Shimon and Rab Shimon and the Rabbanan argue about this. Vikatani, and nevertheless, it's a case that's mentioned in the Mishnah. As Rashi here brings, it says in the Mishnah later that according to Rab Shimon, in such a case, there is still a mitzvah of Yibum. And even if he holds that you don't actually do the Yibum, but at least Chalitza you have to do. And in our Mishnah it says that in such a case of Eishes Achiv Shaloi Haya Ba'ilamai, there's no Yibum, there's no Chalitza at all. So how could it mention it if it's a machlokes? And Rabbi says we don't mention any cases that there are machlokes. Answers the Gemara, no, there is a case where Rab Shimon will agree that there's no mitzvah of Yibum. Okay, so the way I'm going to be reading this continuation of the Gemara here, for the most part, will be first to read the words and translate, and then I'll try to come back and explain what the words mean, the way Rashi explains it. So the Gemara here says, what's the case that Rab Shimon will agree to the Rabbanan that Eishis Achiv, Shlehaya Ba'ilamai, there's no mitzvah of Yibum. B'noilad, if this brother that was now born is born, ulubisayif yibim, and afterwards the yibum was done by a different brother, then loy polig Rab Shimon. Rab Shimon will not disagree that there's no mitzvah of yibum that applies to this newborn brother. So what's the case that we're talking about? So Rashi over here says you have Reuven, Shimon, and Levi. Reuven passes away, and Shimon is alive, and Shimon was alive while Reuven was alive, so Shimon can do Yibum, but Levi was not born yet when Reuven was alive. Levi is born when? Between Reuven being married to her and Shimon being miyabim her. So only in such a case, where Levi is born in between, that's when Shimon will agree that there's no mitzvah of Yibum for Levi. Meaning, if Levi would have been alive when Reuven was married to his wife before he passed away, for sure, he's obligated in the mitzvah of Yibum. If Levi is going to be born after Shimon was already miyavim, this wife of Reuven, which he has to do Yibum because he was alive when Reuven was alive. So then, according to Rab Shimon, Levi will be able to do Yibum on this woman that Shimon now married if Shimon passes away without children. Because in such a case, Levi that has to do Yibum for the woman of Shimon has nothing to do with this woman in connection to Reuven. This is Shimon's wife, and Levi was alive when Shimon was alive. So the only time that Rab Shimon would be maida that this is a scenario of Eishis Achiv Shlehaya Ba'ilamai is if Levi is born right in between Reuven passing away and Shimon doing the Yibum. So then I say, because he was born in between, so this woman, you had to do Yibum for Reuven's sake, it was Reuven's wife, and now you were born right then, so now you're a brother that was born to this wife, and you were not in the lifetime of Reuven being married to her. So once you were born at that time period, you become now asa to marry this woman. The regular erva of Eishis Achiv applies, and you can never get married to her again, including if Shimon is miyavim her, and then Shimon passes away, you still won't be able to marry her. But, like I said before, if you weren't born in between, if either you were born while Reuven was married to her, or you were born after Shimon was miyavim her, so mimanavshach. If you were born while Reuven was alive, so then your brother that was alive when Reuven is alive. If you are born after Shimon was miyavim her, so now you have a chiyuv of Yibum on this wife of Shimon, nothing to do with Reuven. So you were in the lifetime of Shimon. So in that case, Rab Shimon will say that you could do Yibum. The Rabbanan disagree, and the Rabbanan say that even if you were born after Shimon, it was miyavim this woman, but because originally this woman was Reuven's wife, and you were born now later after Shimon passed away, and for sure after Reuven passed away, so you still call the Eishis Achiv Shalei Ba'ilamai. But Rab Shimon has a much more narrow understanding of the concept of Eishes Achav Shlei Haya Bailamai, and that's only if you were born in between. And it's that case that he was born in between Reuven passing away and Shimon being miyavim this woman that our Mishnah is speaking about, and therefore it's not a case of a machlekes. Fragt the Gemara, but v'ha'amar Rav Aishiyah, didn't Rav Aishiyah say Chalak Haya Rab Shimon af Perishayna, that Rab Shimon did argue even about the first case, in other words, even about a case where this woman was born in between. And nevertheless, even there, Rab Shimon held that there is no problem of Eishes Achav Shlei Haya Bailamai. So it seemingly he argued on the entire concept of Eishes Achav Shlei Haya Bailamai. So how does the Mishnah still mention it? And says the Gemara, Ha'itaisav Rab Aishiyah. But as we'll see later there, in the second Perek, Rab Aishiyah's opinion was refuted. So that's not a question. Frag the Gemara. But here we have another case where we see that the Tana is mentioning something which is a machlekes. And what is that? So the Gemara now will bring us from a Mishnah that we have later. This is a Mishnah of Daled Achin, which is later on Daf Chavav, which is the beginning of the third Perek. And the point here is going to be, that's a very, very interesting case there. I'll spell out the whole case. And the Gemara is going to explain that the case of the Mishnah in the third Perek could be applied to all 15 arayas that are mentioned in the beginning of our Masechta. Let's see. Rav Yudah said in the name of Rav, V'chein Tani Rab Chia, and so to Rab Chia said. So again, I'm going to read and translate the words, and then I'll try to explain. Bekulan, regarding all of the cases. When it says Bekulan here, it means regarding all 15 cases in the beginning of our Mishnah, all the 15 arayas. Behen, I could apply to them the Mishnah of the beginning of the third Perek. And what does it say there in that Mishnah? Ho'asura lezeh, muteres lezeh. The woman, the Yevama, that will be asa to one brother, will be allowed to the other brother. V'ho'asura lezeh, and the woman, the Yevama, that's asa to yet the other brother, muteres lezeh, will be mutter to this brother. We're talking about sisters here. These are two sisters, and they both have to be Yevamos. In such a case, where one of these sisters is usher to one of the brothers, each sister is usher to another brother, so then each brother could do Yibum or Chalitze on one of the sisters which are mutter to him. That's the translation of the words. Okay, so now what does this mean? So if you look there in the Mishnah in the third Perek, and Rashi brings here the point to this, and the Mishnah there says as follows. We're talking about four brothers: Reuven, Shimon, Levi, and Yehuda. Reuven and Shimon married sisters, and now they both passed away. So now you have two sisters that you have to do Yibum for. Who's available to do Yibum for them? Levi and Yehuda. Now let's just, before I continue with the case, so what we learned many times before, benigay to a simple erva that you have in the Torah, and that is achos ishtay. You're never allowed to marry your wife's sister. So over here, there is a gzeira midrabanan that's similar. You're not allowed to marry achos zikukasai. This woman that you're not married to yet, but she is destined to be married to you as Yevama, but because she's zikuka, she's already to some extent connected to you as Yevama, so you're not allowed to marry a sister of the zikuka. Okay, so now going back to the case we're speaking about, you have over here these two sisters that were married to Reuven and Shimon that now need to have Yibum done for them by Levi and Yehuda. So Levi has the mitzvah of Yibum for these two sisters, and Yehuda has the mitzvah of Yibum for these two sisters. So, but they can't do Yibum, because each one of these women is a sister to the Zekuka, which also you have to marry. And Chachamim were geyser that for achos zikukasai, you can't do the mitzvah of Yibum. So therefore the Mishnah says, instead of doing Yibum, the only thing that you could do is Chalitza. They're not totally potter, because this is not achos ishtay. Achos ishtay would mean that this is a real erva, and there's no Yibum or Chalitza at all, but for achos zikukasai, you have to do Chalitza and not Yibum. That's the first part of this case. Now the Mishnah goes a step further and says, how about if these two sisters that have an obligation of Yibum to both Levi and Yehuda, what happens if one of these sisters is additionally an erve to Levi, let's say. So she can't do any Yibum with Levi. So now for Levi, he only has one of these sisters, one woman that he has to do Yibum with, the other sister, not this one, which is an erve. Says the Mishnah, So if so, Levi can do Yibum for that one sister. And that one sister is not considered to be a Chais Zikukasai because the other sister is an Erva to him. If she's an Erva to him, it's not Zikukasai. There's no mitzvah of Yibum at all for the other sister. So now there's only one woman that he has to do Yibum for. So therefore he can do Yibum for her. That's the second part of this case. Now the Mishnah goes and says a step further. How about if you have now Levi and Yehuda? So for Levi, there's one of these women that's an Erva for him. And for Yehuda, it's another one of them. The sister is an Erva to him. So now, for each one of them, they could both do Yibum for one of these women. For Levi, the one that's an Erva to him is not Zakukah to him at all, so he can do Yibum on the other sister. For Yehuda, the other one that's an Erva for him is not Zakuk to him, so he can do Yibum for the other sister. So that's the translation of these words. Ha'asura lezeh muteres lezeh, and asura lezeh muteres lezeh. The one that's an Erva for you is not Zakuk to you at all, and you do Yibum for the other woman, and for the other brother, if the other sister is the Erva to him, so then that's the one that's Asa to you, and the other one is the one that you could do Yibum for, and she's not a Chais Zikukasai, because again, the other sister is Asa to you, so she's not at all Zakuk to you. This is the Mishnah later on Dav Chavav in the beginning of the third Perek. So now, what did Rav Yudah Marav and Rav Chia say about this? That this concept, this kind of a scenario of Asura Lezeh, Muteres Lezeh, and each one of these sisters is an erve to one of the brothers, either to Levi or Yehuda, could be applied to all 15 arayas that our Mishnah spoke about. So let's take, for example, one of them. One of the arayas of our Mishnah was Chamoisai, a mother-in-law. If these two sisters, one of them is a mother-in-law of Levi, another one is a mother-in-law of Yehuda, so then I will say that Levi could marry the sister that's not his mother-in-law, and the mother-in-law is not zakuk to him at all, and Yehuda can't marry the one that is his mother-in-law, and the sister is not a chayzuk kasi at all, because that mother-in-law is not zakuk at all. That's one example of one of the 15 arayas of our Mishnah, with that I could say that this halacha of asur lezeh, muteres lezeh would apply to. And similar, regarding all the cases of our Mishnah, I can apply and say that there's a case where one of these sisters is asa to one of the brothers and mutter to the other, and the other sister is the reverse, is mutter to the other brother and is asa to this brother and mutter to this brother. Rashi here, if you take a look, a very long Rashi. Rashi goes through all of the 15 cases of the Arayis in our Mishnah to explain how it applies to all of these cases to say that it's Asura Lezeh, Muteres Lezeh. It's beyond the scope of this shiur to go through the entire Rashi and all the cases, but it's not so difficult actually. It's quite simple once you get the concept. It's very simple. It's Levi and Yehuda, and it's two sisters. Generally, these two sisters, there's an issue of a chais zikukasai, but as long as one of the sisters is a karaiv, or is an erva really, which is one of the relatives, which is an erva, so then there's no issue of a chais zikukasai. Okay, so now the Gemara will bring three different opinions, whether when they said over here, B'kulan anikaire, does it actually refer to all of the 15 cases of the Mishnah, or maybe it does not, they didn't mean that it refers to all 15 cases. And it refers to some of them, but not all of them. So as I said, three different opinions here. Let's see. Rav Yehuda metargem, so Rav Yehuda comes and says that it's possible to say that Mishnah of Asura Lezeh and Muteres Lezeh applies to all of the different kinds of arayas of our Mishnah, mechamaisa ve'elech. Only from the Mishnah where it begins counting from the mother-in-law going forward. The other 6 cases, Avoshite Bavi Dereisha, there's 6 cases before that in the Mishnah, right? The Mishnah begins with Bitai, Bas Benoi, and so on. Those cases, Loi. Regarding them, we don't apply this concept of Asura Lezeh and Muteres Lezeh. Why not? My timer, what's the reason? So the Gemara explains, and again, let me read the words inside, and then I'll try to explain this. Kiven de Bitai Ba'oinsin Mishkachasla. Because a daughter that came from not a marriage, but ba'oinsin, that's only a daughter from a wife that was ba'oinis, that is possible, that it should be your daughter. But b'nisuin loy mishkachasla. But it's impossible for this to be the case when it comes to a marriage, to a real marriage, to a wife. And therefore, b'nisuin kamairi, ba'oinsin loy kamairi. Our Mishnah, when it says bitoi, what kind of a daughter is it speaking about? It's speaking about a daughter from a real marriage. It's not speaking about a daughter from Einsin. And therefore, to apply this concept of asura lezeh, muteres lezeh, benigeya to all 15 cases of the Mishnah, including the case of bitoi, it can't. It can't be applied to bitoi, because by bitoi it would only be possible by bitoi manusasai and not by bitoi from nisuin. That's the translation of the words of the Gemara. So what does this mean? So the pshat of this is that in order to be able to explain that there should be a case over here that this is the daughter of Reuven and Shimon, and at the same time they're also sisters, this is impossible to say that this would be wives that he was married to them. Because if Reuven married the mother of these sisters, and then Shimon went and married the mother of these sisters, how would that be possible? Once Reuven married the mother of these sisters, Shimon is not allowed to marry the mother of these sisters. It's also to marry your brother's wife even after he divorces her. That's a chaysishtay. So Elamai, the only way it's possible to say regarding these sisters that they are also a daughter, they're also the daughters of Reuven and Shimon, is if their mother married Reuven, not married Reuven, but their mother had a relationship as an anusa, not in a marriage, to Reuven. And then Shimon is not also to this woman because he never married his brother. So now Shimon had a relation with this woman. So now these sisters are going to be daughters of Reuven and Shimon. Then it's going to be possible to say that the case of the Mishnah, the erva of bitoi, will apply to this case of these two sisters here that fell for Yevum. That they're a daughter of Reuven and they're a daughter of Shimon as well. And they're usher to one and mutter to the other, as the Mishnah says in the fourth Perek. But if they were daughters of the same mother that was married to Reuven, and then that same mother should go and be married to Shimon, that's not possible. Because Shimon is not allowed to marry the woman that was married to his brother Reuven. So therefore, the case of bitoi cannot be used to explain this case of asura lezeh, muteres lezeh. Now if you remember, Rashi in the beginning of the Masechta did say that in the Mishnah, when it said bitoi in the Mishnah is talking about bitoi manusasai. It's not talking about a regular daughter from a marriage, because that's already mentioned in the Mishnah separately, that bas ishtay. So why is the Gemara here saying that only b'nisuon kamairi, b'oinsen loy kamairi? Taisvis brings up this question in the beginning of the Masechta, and the Mefarshim say that according to Rashi, when it says here in the Gemara b'nisuon kamairi and b'oinsen loy kamairi, it doesn't mean the Mishnah itself. The Mishnah before, in the beginning of the Perek, that's only speaking about Nisuin and not Einsin. Rather, what it means is that this application, that Rav Yehuda Marav said, or Rab Chia said, that we apply the case of the four brothers, which is Asura Lezeh and Muteres Lezeh, to all of the cases of our Mishnah, they were only applying it and they were speaking only about a case of regular marriages, and not of an Anusa. And why not? Taisus over here says because that's not something which is common. The lashon that they said was bekulan ani kaire behen, which means we're talking about something which is common. Something which is not common, that's not what Rav Yehuda Marav or Rab Chia were speaking about. That's the pshat in the Gemara according to Rashi. Okay, so this is all the first opinion over here, which is Rav Yehuda, that says that applying this case of Asura Lezeh, Muteres Lezeh to the 15 arayas of our Mishnah is only from Chamaisai ve'elech, not Bitoi, and then once we don't count Bitoi, we're not talking about any of the other cases as well. Bas Bitoi and Bas Benoi and so on, they're not counted. Abaye disagrees and says no, that Rav Yehuda Marav and Rab Chia were including, applying this even to a case which is coming from not a marriage, from an oinus. So therefore, Abaye metargim av bitei manusasai, that we could be talking about even about a case of a daughter, which is only a daughter not from a marriage but from an oinus. So since that is possible, that these two sisters should be also the daughters of Reuven and Shimon, because Reuven and Shimon, they did not ever marry these women, but they were just an oinus. So if you want that the Mishnah and this application of the Mishnah of Dalet Achin should be in any of these cases of the arayas of our Mishnah, even in a case of Einzin Tehevi, we apply that as well. And Ibayim and Anasuin Tehevi, if you want to find how all of these arayas apply to that Mishnah of Asura Lezeh, Muteres Lezeh, that could also be. So all of those cases, basically all of the 15 cases, it applies to. Aval, however, Eishes Achiv Shaloi Haya Ba'elamai Loi. But one of the 15 cases it does not apply to. What is that case? The case of Eishes Achiv Shaloi Haya Bay Lamai. That case, we can't apply this concept of Asura Lezeh, Muteres Lezeh. My time, why not? Kivin del Rab Shimon, Hu de Mishkachasla. Only according to Rab Shimon, it will be possible, but L'Rabbanon, Loi Mishkachasla. But according to the Rabbanon, this is not possible. So, Beplukta Loi Kamairi. So, the application of the Mishnah of Dalet Achin to our Mishnah to say that all of these arayas could be applied to this case of the Dalet Achin of Asura Lezeh, Muteres Lezeh, we're not going to apply it, we're not going to connect it, because the Tana is not speaking about a case where there is a machlokes. And this would only work out according to Rab Shimon and not according to the Rabbanon. So let me first explain this in general, and soon when the Gemara will bring it up more in detail, I'll explain it more in detail. But the general point over here is, as I explained it before, Rab Shimon has a much narrower opinion of this concept of Eishes Achiv Shalei Haya Bay Lamai. Eishes Achiv Shalei Haya Bay Lamai is only regarding a brother that's born after Reuven passes away, and before Shimon was miyavim this woman. Right? Going back to the case we had before, Reuven, Shimon, and Levi. So if Levi was born between Reuven passing away and Shimon being miyavim her, for Levi this is a woman Shalei Haya Bay Lamai, and he's never allowed to do yibum for her. But Rabbanan have a much broader understanding of Eishes Achiv Shalei Haya Bay Lamai. Even if Levi was born after Shimon was miyavim her, she's still considered for him to be Eishes Achiv Shalei Haya Bay Lamai, and Levi will never be able to do yibum for her. So what the Gemara basically is saying is, according to Rab Shimon, that has a narrower understanding of Eishes Achiv Shalei Haya Bay Lamai, it would be possible to say that this concept of Asura Lezeh, Muteres Lezeh, meaning that this Isser of Eishes Achiv Shalei Haya Bay Lamai should apply for one brother and not apply to the other brother, because he doesn't fit the narrow criteria of Eishes Achiv Shalei Haya Bay Lamai that Rab Shimon sets. But according to the Rabbanan that have a broader understanding of Eishes Achiv Shalei Haya Bay Lamai, we're not going to be able to have a case where this Isser of Eishes Achiv Shalei Haya Bay Lamai should apply only to one brother and not to the other brother. So therefore, according to Abaye, this is only being applied in a scenario where there's no machlokes, not where there's a machlokes. Now comes a third opinion, Rav Safra Metargim. Rav Safra comes and explains and says, Af Eishes Achiv Shalei Haya Bay Lamai. Even regarding this case, this Isser of the Eishes Achiv, that you were not born yet, you were not in her world when she was married to your brother, and over there's an Isser for you to do Yibum, even for that case, it's also included, we could also apply this concept of Asura Lezeh, Muteres Lezeh, that for one brother there will be this Isser of Eishes Achiv Shalei Bay Lamai, and for another brother there won't. And then Gemara explains, how is this? Umishkachas lo b'shita achim. This could be explained and applied in a case where you have 6 brothers, and also va'aliba de Rab Shimon, but only according to Rab Shimon's narrow understanding of the Isser of Eishes Achiv Shaloi Haya Bay Lamai. So let me first continue the Gemara and read the words inside, and then I'll try to explain. V'simanech, and you have a siman for this, what this case is, where you can have this concept of Eishes Achiv Shalei Haya Bay Lamai that will be asa for one brother, but mutter for the other brother, and then the reverse for the other brother mutter, and for the other brother asa. So the siman is, so again, I'll first translate the words and then try to explain. Meis, Reuven passed away. Noilad, Yisachar is born. We have 6 brothers here. Reuven, Shimon, Levi, Yehuda, Yisachar, Zvulun. So Reuven passes away, and Yisachar is born. V'yibim, and Levi does yibum for this wife that Reuven's wife. And now Meis, Shimon passes away. Noilad, and Zvulun is born. And V'yibim, and Yehuda does yibum for Shimon's wife. In such a kind of scenario, according to Rab Shimon, it'll come out that you have one, and these are sisters. These are 2 sisters that were married to Reuven and Shimon. And it would come out that for one of these 2 brothers now, Yisachar and Zvulun, so for Yisachar, for one of these women, she will be a Eishes Achiv Shalei Haya Bay Lamai, but the other will not. And for Zvulun, the other woman will be an Eishes Achiv Shalei Haya Bay Lamai, but the other one not. And therefore, for him, you could apply the concept of Asura Lezeh, Muteres Lezeh, to this Isser, this Erva that's mentioned in our Mishnah, Eishes Achiv Shalei Haya Bay Lamai. but this works only according to Rab Shimon that has a narrow understanding of this concept of Eishes Achav Shloi Haya Ba'Lamai. According to the Rabbanan that has a broader understanding of this, there's no difference. In this case of Reuven, Shimon, Levi, Yehuda, Yisachar, Zvulun, so in the end, for Yisachar and Zvulun, after Reuven, Shimon, and Levi and Yehuda pass away, these two sisters now will be aser for both Yisachar and Zvulun that were born later. For both of them, these wives, these sisters that were wives of Reuven, Shimon, Levi, and Yehuda, will be an Eishes Achav Shloi Haya Ba'Lamai. So if I could explain this case in more detail, the case goes as follows. Reuven and Shimon are married to sisters. And there's going to be 6 brothers here. Reuven, Shimon, Levi, Yehuda, Yisachar, and Zvulun. But right now we have Reuven, Shimon, Levi, and Yehuda, which are all alive. And Reuven and Shimon are married to sisters. Reuven passes away. And after Reuven passes away, Yisachar is born. And then after Yisachar is born, Levi goes ahead and is Yavim, Reuven's wife. So this Yisachar that was born in between Reuven passing away and Levi doing the Yibum, so he's going to be Asa to marry this woman forever. Again, that's the key according to Rab Shimon. The Isser of Eishes Achav Shloi Haya Ba'Lamai refers to the brother that's born in between. He wasn't alive in the lifetime when Reuven was married to this woman, and he was born before Shimon was Miyabim her. Okay, so for Yisachar, she's going to be Asa forever. Now, Shimon passed away. And now the other sister that Shimon was married to needs to have Yibum done for her as well. So what happens? But now Zvulun is born. Zvulun is also born in between. In between what? Before Yehuda is going to go and be Miyabim, Shimon's wife. So now for Zvulun, this woman that he was born in between, Shimon passing away, and Zvulun being Yehuda being Miyabim her, so for Zvulun, she's going to be Asa for him forever. But now what happened after Levi and Yehuda were Miyavim both of these women of Reuven and Shimon? Now they both passed away. And now Yisachar and Zvulun are the 2 surviving brothers that have to do the Yibum for these 2 sisters that were first married to Reuven and Shimon and were then married to Levi and Yehuda. So what's the story with Yisachar and Zvulun? Are they both allowed to do Yibum for both of these sisters? So again, going back to what the Mishnah says over there, you can't do Yibum for Achais Zekukasai unless the other Zekuka, the other Yevama, is totally Asa to you. So then she's not Achais Zekukasai. According to Rab Shimon, it's going to come out over here that both Yisachar and Zvulun are going to be able to do Yibum for one of these sisters because there's an Isser of Eishes Achav Shloi Haya Ba'Lamai only for one of them and not for the other. So for Yisachar, the one that was married to Reuven, and he was born in between Reuven and Shimon, Reuven passing away and Shimon being Miyavim her, so for him, that woman is going to be Eishes Achav Shloi Haya Ba'Lamai. But for the other woman, she's not Eishes Achav Shloi Haya Ba'Lamai. He was already alive when Yehuda was Miyavim her, and when Shimon was even alive. So for the other one, he can do Yibum for. And the reverse when it comes to Zvulun. Zvulun was born between Shimon passing away and Yehuda being Miyavim her. So for her, that woman is the one that he can't do Yibum for, because he was born right in between. But for the other woman, which Levi married, so Zvulun was born when Levi was still married to her. And now when Levi passes away, so for him, this is not Eishes Achav Shloi Haya Ba'Lamai. He was alive when Levi was alive. He can do Yibum for her. So therefore, according to Rab Shimon, that has a narrow approach to this concept of Eishes Achav Shloi Haya Ba'Lamai, that it's only if you're born in between when the first brother passed away and the second brother did the Yibum, so then I say that it's Eishes Achav Shloi Haya Ba'Lamai. So therefore for Yisachar, that will be for Reuven's wife, and for Zvulun, that will be for Shimon's wife. So therefore, each one could do Yibum on one of them, because it's not Achais Zikukasai. The other one is totally Asa to him. But according to the Rabbanan, this will not work. According to the Rabbanan, both Yisachar and Zvulun, it will be the Achais Zikukasai, because according to the Rabbanan, or actually according to the Rabbanan, both of them are actually going to be Aser to Reuven, to Yisachar and Zvulun. So if it's Aser to both of them, the whole case of Asura Lezeh, Muteres Lezeh, does not apply. That's the explanation of the case in more detail. Hope you understand it. Now, why did the Gemara bring all of this? The Gemara is bringing you to show you that, according to the last opinion here, of Safre, we are applying the Mishnah of Dalar Achin to the case of our Mishnah and saying that the Mishnah is talking about, it's going on our Mishnah, even though this is a case of a machlokes. Rabbi said that our Mishnah is not mentioning something which is a machlokes, but over here we see we are mentioning something which is a machlokes. So the Gemara gives a few answers to this. We'll learn the first answer today. The Gemara says, Ella leRebbi, well, the Bach takes out the word Rebbe, Ella, leRebbi hani klali lesle. Rebbe does not agree to this that we said over here according to Rab Chia or Rav Yehuda Marav, that we're talking about this case, including this case of Nailad and Yibim, Meis, Nailad, Yibim, Meis, Nailad, Yibim, which is a case which would be dependent on a Machlekes and only according to Rab Shimon, not according to the Rabbanon. Rebbe doesn't hold to that. And therefore, according to Rebbe, he remains with what he said, that our Mishnah, at least in the first Pedic, is only mentioning something which is not dependent on a Machlekes.